Here we are for day number 5 of remote learning. Our last topic being covered is criminal profiling, getting inside the mind of usually the killer and seeing why they do this and how they turned into this. This will go across an 8-page um, notes, as you will. You'll get a copy of this on the Google Classroom as well, so that way you can review this if you please. What is criminal profiling? Developing a psychological profile of the offender based on the crime scene. So, based on the crime scene, people who solve these crimes analyze how everything was done, and that generally tells you a lot about the person who committed the crime. A lot at the crime scene can be used by specifically a forensic psychologist in order to figure out some things about this person, and we'll go through some trends that are found later in this as well. One of the first things to do is label this person, to describe them as organized, disorganized, or a mix of the two. Organized offenders plan everything out ahead. They pick out the victim ahead of time. Any tools that they need are brought by them. They're very meticulous for details, so they keep very good attention to how things are done, and it's clear that it was planned out. It tells the forensic psychologist a lot about the criminal. An organized person. Do we have more down here? Yes, here. There's more about the organized killer down here that we'll get to. But this is very helpful in describing what this type of person is more likely to do in the future. The forensic psychologist will be the one that works most on this. They'll get to view things used in the departments in order to help solve this crime. More about the organized offender. This is about their life. If they're organized, they're usually high in birth order, so they're usually an older child. They're usually seen as more of a responsible person in the family. Very intelligent, have their lives together, but a series of stressful situations makes them act out. Most of them have a live-in partner, whether married or not married, socially adept, and follow the coverage of their crimes in the media very carefully. So they want the media to glorify everything that they're doing. That is very opposite of the spontaneous one. In a spontaneous offense, this would be the disorganized killer. For the disorganized person, they often depersonalize the victim. They make it seem not real. They make it so that to them it's not seen as a big deal. They don't really want the coverage that the organized person would want to see. Throughout the crime, very little conversation between the offender and the victim. Crime scene seems random and sloppy. It doesn't look planned out. It doesn't look like they brought their own things in order to do whatever was done. They make it possible to draw on conclusions about this offender as well. They are often of average or below average intelligence, usually younger children in the birth order. They live on their own and not socially mature. They live or work near the scene of the crime, poor work history. By living or working near the scene, it makes it more convenient for them to go to that area based on how this person functions. The mixed one is a little tricky. They have characteristics of both organized and disorganized. Offenders may have provided their own tools, but they may have picked a victim randomly. The profile may not be as accurate as well. When we're talking about the IQ of these offenders, the organized offenders, some of the bigger names that are known, like Ed Kemp, guys like that, IQs north of 130, which is very, very intelligent. The spontaneous one, a disorganized offender, far south of 130. What do we use this profiling for? We have to find these offenders. but it's much harder than what it sounds. Starting by narrowing it down. It doesn't work in every single case, but it can be very, very helpful. Here's a couple more words to check out. Psychopath versus sociopath. For a psychopathic person, we know what makes them work. We know how they work. They're seen as being monsters. So they're untreatable predators. They're unstoppable. They covet everything and they want to gain pleasure from whatever is being done. So they enjoy whatever offense they are committing. They know how to manipulate other people. They know how to affect their feelings. They're very good at getting people to do what they want. Sociopathic. Similar to the psychopath, but they usually react because of social and environmental factors. So that's something that makes them tick. Sociopaths have very little feelings for what's going on. People with this, no sense of right or wrong. They display very little empathy, so they don't feel sorry for whatever's being done. People with this disorder engage in risky behavior. They're skilled liars and good at conning other people into doing what they want, may be aggressive or violent, but they react on impulse. So they don't consider how things could work out in the end. Instead, there's something that triggers them in order to act out. The triad effect is what's considered to be the three causes of why a person turns into a serious offender. And what they really fall into is animal cruelty, pyromania, and bedwetting. People who have these traits statistically have turned into more violent offenders than others. But before that, things that cause people to become violent offenders. First one, parental rejection. Being rejected is hard. One person, David Berkowitz, he was hurt when his biological mom brushed him off. Some speculated that Berkowitz's son's name was a fantasy attempt to reclaim a parent or child identity that had been crushed in real life. David Berkowitz, he was a killer, and what his thing was that the neighbor's dog, whose name was Sam, was telling him to do all this. That was his idea. Ted Bundy. Ted's emotional growth was stopped in its tracks after he learned that he was illegitimate at age 13. He said it was like he hit a brick wall. Witnessing violence, especially as a child. Some murderers claimed that exposure to violent events ignited their thirst for blood. Ed Gein said that seeing farm animals slaughtered gave him perverted ideas. Albert Fish and Andre Chikatilo blamed their sadistic bloodlust on frightening childhood events. Juvenile detention. Here's Albert Fish again. Reform school did anything but reform them. Sadistic guards and medieval punishments are often paralleled by the violent behavior of the prisoners who went on to be serial killers. Carl Panzram was a juvenile delinquent. The brutal torture he received aggregated his violent rage. From the treatment I received when I was there and the lessons I learned from it, I'd fully decided that I would live my life. I made up my mind that I would burn, rob, destroy, and kill everything and everyone as long as I could. So he's saying that he was trained in order to be this way by going to detention. Being rejected by peers. Multiple murderers are isolated as children. Henry Lee Lucas, who was already a shy child, was ridiculed because he had an artificial eye. He later said that this mass rejection caused him to hate everyone. Kenneth Bianchi was also a child loner with many problems. One clinical report said the boy drips urine in his pants, doesn't make friends very easily, and has twitches. Other children make fun of him. Dahmer was antisocial, laughing when he saw a fellow classmate injured. He became an alcoholic teenager, routinely ignored by his peers. Back to the triad effect. These are very, very large warning signs. First one is animal cruelty. Torturing animals is a big red flag. Animals are often seen as practice before they move on to killing humans. So they use this as practice, and the punishment not nearly as harsh. Ed Kemper buried his family cat alive, dug it up, cut off its head. Jeffrey Dahmer was notorious for animal cruelty, cutting off dogs' heads and placing them on sticks behind his house. Pyromania. So this is about setting things on fire. Joseph Callinger said, "Oh, what ecstasy setting fire brings to my body. What power I feel at the thought of fire. But what pleasure, what heavenly pleasure. Pyromania is often sexually stimulating activity for killers. The dramatic destruction of property feeds the same perverse need to destroy another human. And because these serial killers don't see other humans as more than objects, the leap between fires and killing people is unfortunately easy for them." Bedwetting, considered the most intimate of these symptoms, less likely to be willfully divulged. Some estimate 60% of multiple murders wet their beds past adolescence. Killer Kenneth said, apparently spent many nights marinating in his urine-soaked sheets. Statistically, these are considered to be big symptoms and triggers for eventual killings. This is page number 4. So last one we're looking at today. Profiling works best when you look at psychopathology. So these are things to consider when these people are being profiled. Some killers leave a signature behind. It's something that they do specifically that makes them separate from anyone else. So it's what their unique thing is. On a more humorous example, if we look at the wet bandits from Home Alone, their signature is that they turn on faucets in the house so that the house floods. So that's what their signature is. It's what they do that's unique. And then they get the name the Wet Bandits, of course. Antecedents. So what did the murderer have to place and plan before the act? Or what triggered them to act on some days but not all of the days? So there had to have been something in there that made them act out on one of the days but not the other days. Methods and manners. What type of victim did they select? Is it always the same type of person? People with certain traits? Sometimes it represents people from their past. Those are ones to look for. How was the method and manner completed? Was the person shot? Were they stabbed? Were they strangled? Was it done by some other means? How was the body disposed of? Was it all completed in one scene? Did it occur somewhere and then move somewhere else? It really just depends on the person. And afterwards, what does the murderer do? Is the murderer trying to inject himself into the investigation by reacting to the media reports or contacting investigators? This has been done by some. One of them, Dennis, I think it was Dennis Rader. He worked for ADT. Actually, I'm going to check this before I get going. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader. So he was in Kansas, and his job was ADT Security Services. So the people that install security equipment at your house in order to make you feel safe and protected. But he would use this for different means. Once he figured out how to install the security system in someone's house, he would get to visit the house. He'd get to see everything about the inside of the house, see the weak spots, where he could use that to his advantage. Eventually, he was known as the BTK killer: bind, torture, and then kill. So he would bind the person, so they would be tied up. He would essentially torture them before killing them. And when he didn't feel that he was getting the social or media coverage that he deserved, he wrote letters wondering what he has to do in order to get some media coverage. So this is the first half of our criminal profiling. The second part of our criminal profiling looks specifically at, well, let's just see, sadism, so causing pain to people, and then mental disorders that some of these people may encounter or have. We'll see you soon on the Google Meet. We get to start our last project and our last grade of the semester, the Serial Killer Cereal Box.